Thank you for joining us tonight. I really appreciate everyone's participation, and we've had a lot of good response and a lot of good feedback, and we just hope that you carry on with us. We've got exciting things planned. I am a part of a team of other clinicians that will be bringing wonderful content. So tonight we're on part 3. This is our last of our series, but please hang tight with us because we're going to discuss how do we cope? How do we keep going on? Okay. So we put this disclaimer every time that I speak because we do understand that, as Ms. Chris was talking about, if we are experiencing different things within our bodies, within our minds, within our souls, it's hard to hear things that bring up the things that cause us pain. So, if you need to take a break, if you need to kind of step away, that's fine. This is recorded and you can come back to it. So we're just going to jump right in. We've had all the other parts and we discussed, the different stages of grief. How do you cope? That's the biggest question, because after you lose someone or something, a few months down the line, a lot of times people have forgotten, well, did we check in on such and such? How are they doing? And then, it becomes this thing where we're not really quite sure what we're supposed to say to someone because we kind of pushed them over to the side, not purposely. We just haven't thought about how much pain they may be going through. And the person may not even know that they need to express themselves in that way because pain tends to do that. We tend to isolate. So first of all, I like to know, for anybody that's looking at this now, or if you're going to look at it later, but, have you checked in with yourself? Have you identified your feelings? Point blank, even if you put it on a piece of paper, get it out. Don't just hold it in, because a lot of times we just keep going in our minds, like I'm feeling this way today, and it changes from day to day, from week to week, or we're stuck in one place and we feel like we can't get out, but we keep going through the motions. We go to work, we go to school, we isolate, we talk too much, we are picking up negative coping skills, a lot of different things that we're doing. It may not be beneficial. But then on the flip side of that, you have people that are coping well. It's like the normal process of grief. A lot of people don't really understand that there is a normal process to this as well. In life, we have life and death. We have loss. We have things that we lose. And we have to learn to live with those things. But, when people tell us get over it or get through, it's like, you're not really telling me how, or you're not giving me the steps, or you're not giving me the support. So that means that I need to look at myself if I can. So that's why I ask you to identify your own feelings and also look at how are you coping? What are you doing? Are you looking for distractions? Are you really identifying with the loss? Are you ignoring it? There's different things that we do that may be helpful or they may be harmful. Are you taking care of yourself? When things first happen, sometimes we neglect ourselves. We don't take care of our hygiene. We don't take care of business. We let bills go. A lot of things can happen, and if no one is checking in on you, you can tend to isolate in a way that causes some more detrimental things to happen to you. And we don't want that to happen. And that's why I'm kind of bringing these things up now, because even if you haven't experienced the kind of losses that we've talked about in the previous seminars, there could be a time when it could happen, or someone in your life you need help through. It's always best if you do educate yourself, because I think before we were talking about, we kind of don't want to talk about death. We'll talk about life. We love life, of course. But on the flip side of it, there is this thing that we call death. And without knowing where someone's gone, or your own belief system and all these different things, and not really kind of internalizing how you feel, you don't really deal with it well. So I always like to look at prevention, so if I can educate myself, if I can have a belief system beforehand, it can kind of help me cope when I do actually have to face something. And another thing, are you responsible for other people? A lot of people are in families and you're having to take care of others. And whether you experienced the loss yourself or someone else did, you have to look at, am I helping them or am I being detrimental? And if I am, do I need to seek help? So who do you support and who supports you? Do you have a trusted friend? We talked before about how, 1 in 5 Americans do not have a support person that they can go to directly and just, really vent to, talk to, just be themselves around. Are people checking in on you? after a loss, it can be 2 or 3 months down the line and you are still really struggling. And especially during COVID, when we've had multiple losses, we really haven't been able to see this break that we need. A lot of times, like even now, it's been over a year, and people are like, "Oh, well, things probably are starting to let up." As far as seeing people, I'm like, no, because actually, more people are starting to engage now, probably than I had at the beginning, because we are going into this thing that doesn't look like it did before. It's not what we would consider normal. We're still wearing masks. People are still sick, but yet, now we're having to engage. People are being told they have to go to school, they have to go to work, and be around others. And what does that really mean? And if you've already lost resources and different things and you have to engage, that brings along a different kind of anxiety. So, like we're seeing an uptick, and some people are even saying, like from the effects of it from some PTSD. Do you need a therapist? We talked extensively about that. And like I said, if you don't have anyone you can speak with on a personal level, or if it's too heavy for the person that you need to speak to, like some things you don't want to share with a friend or a family member. Seeing a therapist is your next best thing, because they're there to help you move through it and gain skills to be able to cope and to deal with your life, instead of, just kind of staying stuck in that same space. If you are responsible for children, that's a different aspect of things, because a lot of times when these things are happening, children are kind of left to the side, like you feel for them. You don't understand how they grieve. A lot of times the adults are trying to scramble and make sure that, everybody's taken care of, but are we looking at their feelings? Are we looking at the emotional responses that they're having? Are they isolated? And we'll get into that a little bit more later. So that brings me to the next thing. Dr. Rondo, she came up with this acronym S.T.U.G, and it's subsequent temporary upsurges in grief. And, we experience these all the time, but we don't put like a label to them. But, I kind of like to think of it as like, oh, it's my S.T.U.G response. So it can happen in cycles. It can happen on a birthday. It's what we call triggering, or things that activate you to think about your loved one. Or if you lost like your financial means or whatever, and you used to live in a certain place and now you have to pass by that place, different responses are brought up, and you might be on your way to work, and next thing you know, you're crying and you don't know why. And it's because you happen to pass by a certain street. Weddings, anniversary dates, holidays, even changes of seasons. If you had special things that you did at certain times with people that are no longer with you, it gets really, really hard during those times. And with multiple losses with COVID, from what I'm seeing, is that, if you've lost 2 parents to COVID in the same year, and then you've got their anniversary, 2 birthdays, and Mother's Day, Father's Day, all these things are coming up. And, in your mind, you're like, okay, I don't even know how to respond to this. This is overwhelming, and especially if you had special things that you did with that person. And as it goes on, if we look at it down the years, it's like 10 years later, you're still feeling the same way. You'll have an upsurge, but it shouldn't be that, it's like you're reliving it all over again. If that's the case, most of the time you will have needed to have seen someone way before then. But if you're experiencing that now, I would suggest that you do try to see someone, because without processing it well, you continue to have this scab. And every time someone or these things come up, it's like it's pulling it off. It's another wound. And you're like, I cannot seem to get this thing healed. It's like, okay, when I go to the doctor, if I'm bleeding out, I don't want a little Band-Aid, I want a suture, I want the real deal so that I can go ahead and really heal. But if not, I've got a Mickey Mouse Band-Aid. It just keeps coming off. Over the years, guess what? That thing is going to fall off. I'm not even going to have that limb anymore. All of it's just going to, just kind of spiral out of control. It's the same thing with our emotions. We try to put a little Band-Aid on it. We try to ignore it. We act like it's not something that's bigger than what it is. And next thing we know, we're dealing with a lot of different issues that we didn't even have when we started the whole process in the first place. So I just kind of wanted to give you guys that little tidbit about the S.T.U.G response. And this is just a little bit of continuation of it. Hearing songs, and I think Ms. Chris mentioned the senses. certain smells. There are certain things that can be cooked even that you'll be like, oh, I remember when such and such used to make this. And, it brings up things, but you can kind of turn it around too, because that can also be comforting to you. It's like, we really enjoyed those times. You try to turn it around to something that is meaningful to you rather than just, the pain that's there, because over time, it just kind of helps you adapt. So getting on to support for children. I work in a school and I love working with kids, no doubt. But one of the biggest things and the biggest challenges that you can have is when they shut down and when they stop talking. And without proper information, you really don't know what's going on with them. And you have to kind of imagine, okay, if you've got 1,300 kids coming into a school and each classroom is broken down into 30 or 40, kids in a class, you're not going to know everything about each child. I'm sorry, you're just not going to. But if something has happened in that child's life and, it's pretty extensive, you need to let a counselor know. Sometimes they do have, the coach or the teacher that they really trust that they'll tell. But if you look at middle school and high school, a lot of times they won't disclose anything. So you just kind of notice that sometimes they're being a little bit more withdrawn, or their grades, that's usually the telltale sign, is that their grades are slipping. But, when we're looking at how do we support them, parents sometimes come to a loss because they're like, okay, they're in their teenage years, they're not even really talking to me. The little guys, it's a little bit easier because, they'll at least, have some words for, like, this doesn't feel good, or I miss such and such. But the older ones may or may not express it in the way that you would want them to, or the way they need to, or they may just not express it with you as a parent or a caregiver. So it's good when you can get them to talk, but also just being supportive by being there. You never know. You can be doing something totally opposite, like take them for ice cream and you're talking about things that are unrelated, but then they'll bring it up in a quiet moment because they trust you and because they need to get it out. And they're very resilient, but if you don't take time out to actually address the needs or address the fears, they oftentimes will just either pick up negative coping skills or either just not say anything. And then these people become the adults that are saying when they're 25 and 26 years old, I lost my such and such when I was in whatever grade, and I never really got over it. I never got through it. I don't mean to say got over, but never got through it. And the people in my life, they didn't really understand what I was going through. And you'd be surprised how many people pick up drugs because of pain of loss. Regardless, it could be moving, it could be they didn't promote, to the next grade. A lot of things that stunted them at a certain grade, they just decide that, hey, nothing's going to get better, and they didn't feel like they had a trusted support system. So I say that to say this: always check in with them, notice them, look at what they're doing, and also, see what they're learning. If, you notice that their grades are slipping, you're asking them some questions and they cannot answer the question, that means they're not learning anything. And that's when you have to intervene. A lot of times, like we expect everything to happen at school, but no, there are things at home that, life lessons and, things they need to be learning at home for common sense sake, but also for, for academics as well. So when you're looking at trying to get support for kids that have lost people, I want to go to this side, grief support in San Diego. So there are grief groups, but there aren't a lot that are tailored just towards kids. I like this one that's offered by Elizabeth Hospice. It doesn't have to be somebody that was, in hospice care. It just has to be a child that's lost someone. And they have a week-long camp, but also they have ongoing support groups. And right now they're doing them virtually. And when they are in person, they're really, really good. There's a YouTube video on their website as well. But I left this contact information up here because if you are in San Diego and you're looking for grief counseling, Elizabeth Hospice can direct you. Also, you can call 211 and they can direct you to other supports. I know Rady's has one, Rady's Hospital, and Palomar as well. And looking at some of the questions that we've had in the past about people that have lost others, I'm not just centering on just COVID on this presentation, but when we look at violent loss, that is a separate type of pain that people generally people just don't understand. Sometimes people just don't have the words to kind of support you, and it's good to have a network of support. So when you look at this particular website, you can just type that in, Survivors of Violent Loss Network, and it will bring up, if there's something going on, if there's events, but also lots of resources for reading and for getting, a little bit more educated. But I would suggest that you would find an individual therapist if you have lost someone to violence, because the after effects, like years later, it's just better if you can kind of get someone on board now to kind of help you process your feelings. As far as national support, SAMHSA has, they have a lot of educational resources, but if you call this number, you can find out if there are specific substance abuse groups within your state. It's kind of difficult to kind of put a broad, just general thing out there for everything, but these are the ones that I find the most helpful, because substance abuse does come up more often than not when we are dealing with mental illness, and when we're dealing with problems with coping with, you don't even have to have a specific diagnosis, but we already know that alcoholism and use of marijuana is on the uptick, and people are using these things to cope. And a hand, and when you're already in pain, it can lead to other things. And that's why I put the National Suicide Prevention Hotline on here too, because when people are hurting and when people are experiencing a lot of loss, sometimes they talk to others and they don't know what resources to give them. So if you are a friend, you will keep these things in mind. You will, say, okay, let's go online. Let's see what's out there. You want to help someone. And if nothing else, you always call 911 if it's an immediate problem, or if someone's in immediate danger. But, if it's something that you feel like, okay, I need to share something with you because you've been saying this and this, you don't want to go here, because most of the time when you're dealing with your friend, they don't want to get seen, right? They are like, no, I don't want to talk to anybody about my problems. I'm talking to you. And you're like, okay, it's above my head. I want to make sure that you stay with us and that you stay safe. And I'll be right here with you to, help you through it. And then you give them a resource and you walk them through it with them. Don't just give it to them and let them go. That's helpful at times too, because I find that a lot of times people will give me a call and they're like, well, I have a friend that, and they really do. It's not them. They have a friend that is experiencing certain things, and they really just don't want to be seen, or they don't want to physically go into an office. And right now, with all of the virtual things that we have going on, it's so much easier to do it from the comfort of your own home. And a lot of times people are shocked that just by voicing how they feel, that they actually can get on the road to, okay, recovery. I can address my issues. I can see where it's connecting the dots sometimes, like, when did this first happen? How can I get to another space? And you'd be surprised that using different tools and different things, and I'm not saying it's a perfect science. I am saying that when you do try to engage and try to actually move through the grief, that you can get better. But when you don't, and when you isolate and you keep it in, most people will tell you just by getting it out, getting my story out. That's why support groups are so helpful. And that's my next thing, is that I want to offer for people in San Diego. That's the next little thing that I wanted to share, is that we want to start a support group, a grief and loss support group here in San Diego for anybody that is local. I'm going to give this website out. It's healthy_well@yahoo.com. I will get in touch with you personally, and we can just discuss, if you want to be in the group or if you don't. It's not something where we're trying to diagnose anyone or change. It's strictly a support group. And if we get 10 to 12 participants, we'll go ahead and do it. And we'll probably do it even if there's 5. But I want to make sure that there are a good amount of people, but we keep it closed. We don't film it. And it is something that can be ongoing. And, it's just something for you, and it will be free of charge. And I just kind of want to keep this going, and I want to make sure that people are supported. And so if we have more than 5, we have more than 10, we'll still break them up into groups, and there'll be different days of the week. So we'll just have to figure that out, see what we get. But again, that website is healthy_well@yahoo.com, and you can just put attention Kendra Miller. I want to thank you guys for joining us today. That I have found